Nashi returns to his home, nestled within a technologically advanced city on Kamigawa, holding himself differently than he had before. He is no longer afforded the wide-eyed innocence of a child. Things have changed. His mother has changed. His father, Genku, knows the moment he hears her voice. What is unmistakably her is now a hovering spirit holding their son's hand. Tamio no longer has a body. It has been replaced by a string of characters that glow in time with phantom breath. The father embraces his family, the mother returns home, and the boy stands happy in the middle of it all. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Ether Hub. I'm Simon, bringing you more Magic the Gathering lore. Today's the final day for the main story of March of the Machine. I'd like to refer to this as the pre-epilogue, the aftermath before aftermath. This story will wrap up the March of the Machine arc and everything that happened in the previous chapter, which you can find linked on your screen now or in the description below. And believe me, a lot happened. If you haven't seen that video yet, I strongly suggest you do. It's a doozy. With the climactic close to the new Phyrexian arc, we saw a completed Ajani and Nissa captured by the heroes as their mother of machines, Elish Norn, was put down for good. Ren's final act was to swap new Phyrexia and Zolfir's place in the multiverse, essentially locking the Phyrexians out of space and time while bringing Zolfir back as its own plane. Our heroes escaped that doomed world. Koth and the remaining Mirren resistance, Karn, Chandra, Teferi, and Elspeth, return to the lush fields of Zolfir to digest exactly what happened and figure out what they can do now. What happens to the planes still being invaded by new Phyrexia? How does the multiverse move forward? On Kaldheim, Harold, King of the Elves, jumps from a commandeered ship, wondering how long it's been since his brother, Tyvar, had sunk below the sea. How long had it been since Koma, the Cosmos Serpent, completed by Phyrexia, dragged him under the water? Miraculously, the fighting around him stops, and everywhere there's music and cheering. How long will it be until Harold gives up? How long would it be until Tyvar gave up on him? Harold never had to answer the question. Tyvar burst from the water carrying the serpent's engorged head. He smiled, slapping its surface. Sure, his brother could see him. Harold doesn't often cheer when met with a boast he cannot match, but today, Harold was sure to make an exception. On Kaladesh, Pia Nalaar braces for death. Her only weapon was a shard of metal she pulled from the wreckage of a plane. On a platform above the Aetherflux reservoir, she was surrounded by Phyrexian soldiers. She watched the whirling blade coming at her. If she could push the hunk of metal off the platform with her, maybe she'd buy a little more time for the other survivors. Then, the whirling machine stood still, and the metal soldiers crumpled in place. Hope blooms in her chest as she sees all of Giapur covered in Phyrexians falling apart. Even their warships plummet from the sky. They've somehow won. Pia doesn't understand how this is happening, but she suspects Saheeli will fill her in later. What she does know, and has always known, is that she can trust her daughter Chandra to get things done. She, no doubtably, played a role in Phyrexia's defeat. Everywhere drums call, filling the chests of the Zolfiran people. They had found a new home in the multiverse, while new Phyrexia lie broken and defeated beyond the reach of time. Teferi can't help but smile at the sound of the drums. For him, it has been hundreds of years since he has heard the sound. While his people celebrated a victory, Teferi was mourning losses. He searched for a spot to plant what remained of Ren, a small acorn. There were so many beautiful places, he didn't know where she would prefer. Where was the most fitting spot for the woman who saved the multiverse? In the end, Teferi just walked, acorn in hand, until it felt right. When she was grown, she could move wherever she liked. And wherever that was, Zolfir would welcome her. Teferi plants her on a grassy hill overlooking a town, waters it, and sits down next to the little mound to mourn. In the village below, flutes accompanied the drums as the Zolfirans taught the Mirrens how to dance to the song. After he is content with taking care of Ren, Teferi joins the festivities. He had lived for centuries without these people, but to them he was only gone for a short while. This place is his home, and yet it isn't. He needed to learn to make it his home again, make friends again, in the wake of the Phyrexian war that seems an impossible task. A pain pricks in the corner of his eyes. It's tears, as he watches a Mirren attempt to play the Zolfiran flute. Teferi allowed himself to weep, tears for his lost years, tears for Karn and his lost past, tears for Nissa and Ajani and all the others who may never wake now that New Phyrexia had fallen. Tears for those who cannot join the dance by the fire. In the dead of night, Teferi gets to his feet and leaves the celebration, heading over towards the healing ward. As he searches for his friends, he takes time to visit the wounded, assisting the healers with their duties. Eventually, he finds his comrades, sequestered away in their own section. As he approached, he heard Kaya and Chandra talking about the possibilities of those who were turned by Phyrexia. Karn and Koth just looked upon Ajani and Nissa, completed with metal throughout their bodies, interlacing with flesh and red sinew. They were breathing, but unconscious. They hadn't moved since they got back from New Phyrexia. Karn and Koth had worked to pull some metal from Nissa's body, but some were essential for her to keep living, so some had to stay. Ajani still had all of the metal the splicers had fit him with. The brilliant Saheeli Ray's best guess was that New Phyrexia was keeping in contact with them through some kind of signal. The oil might have amplified that signal, but now that New Phyrexia was out of range, the oil waits for new orders. Receiving none, its agents are inert. Being a megalomaniac, Norn wouldn't want others besides her to control her army, so maybe without her, the oil was rendered unoperational. Their friends may well be asleep forever, but all they could do was wait for what happens next. Teferi sees Melira, almost too weak to acknowledge him. Her chest wound had gone bad, and judging by her clammy skin and glassy eyes, she didn't have very long, regardless of what the healers did. At least Kaya had some good news. Liliana and Vivian were alright. Tyvar would be bragging about how he killed a Phyrexian sea serpent for ages. Kaido and the Wanderer were helping reconstruct Kamigawa, but there were still no signs of the completed Jace and Vraska. Tidings from different planes probably meant very little to Melira, who spent her life in New Phyrexia. Melira gets Teferi and Karn's attention, and though her voice is weak, she explains that she has an idea for fixing Ajani and Nissa. She wanted to try cleansing their bodies of all benign oil. It might work if their hearts are untouched. Melira knew she didn't have much time left, and they would have to try soon. She wanted people to have hope that someone could be cured after they were completed. Then, maybe one day, someone else would figure out how to do it without her. Koth watches Elspeth approach, alighting from a tree and floating down in front of him like a feather. Koth asks if she will talk to him, as they walk out to a clear patch of grass. He can't remember the last time he saw so many plants, maybe never in his life. This place was very different from Mirrodin. Before he could say anything, Elspeth knew he wanted advice. He asked if she knew about Melira's plan, but she did not. She did know that Melira didn't have much more time, and that she would be sorry for her loss. There was sadness in her voice, but Koth couldn't see it on her face. When he first met Elspeth, she had cried so often, but now she was composed. Koth explained what Melira wanted to do, how it would probably kill her, and how Karn would probably burn out the rest of Venzer's spark as well. Melira would keep their bodies from being further infected, and somehow Karn would use Venzer's spark inside him as a filter for Ajani and Nissa's. Melira would clean their bodies and sparks, then Karn would place them back inside. He struggled with the idea of Ajani and Nissa getting a second chance while thousands of their brethren would not, especially considering all the harm and damage and lives they've took in the name of New Phyrexia. Koth was afraid, but Elspeth was not. She knew that everyone chose their own fate in the end, and Melira was choosing the end that she wanted for herself. Koth didn't know what they would do after, how they would send off Melira in this soft, lush place. There were a lot of new customs here, and the other Mirrans would have to get used to it as they attempted to make Zolfir their new home. He was more grateful than he could express to have a new home while his was destroyed, but still it would be a difficult transition. Elspeth embraces him, promising to always be his friend. If he needed her at all he had to do was pray. She leaves him without a goodbye, but it is time to say goodbye to someone else. Koth enters the healer's ward. watching as Mirrodin's 5 suns move across its new sky. Saheeli suggested that it might be a consequence of the planes overlapping. It was an unintended consequence, just like him and the other Mirrans. This place isn't their home, just like it's not the sons of Mirrodin's home. But at least now it had a little bit of home in it. Melira wanted to be outside when it happened, so they carried her along with Ajani and Nissa in cots out to the grass. Teferi forms a small time bubble around them, and Koth lays Melira down between the 2 completed planeswalkers. Karn stands over them while Teferi takes a breath, giving them the space between 2 heartbeats to save their friends. Karn reached into their metal bodies and pulled out something shimmering and bright. There's a boom, and the 2 orbs Karn had been holding are gone. Melira begins to glow and it spreads through Ajani and Nissa. Another boom brings the orbs back to Karn. One pure and one crumbling. Teferi's heart sinks as Nissa's orb flickers and holes form as shards of her spark fall away. Kaya helps Melira send the sparks back into their hosts, and Teferi drops his spell. Ajani's good eye flutters as he sits up, asking where he is. He slumps back to the ground exhausted, after processing that he's on Zolfir. Now Karn slumps over. The lights within him dimmed. He said he felt lonelier, that he would miss him, referring to Venzer, who had this entire time lived on in some way when he gave his spark to the golem. But now that spark had been exhausted, Venzer's final gift. Koth checks on Melira. She's gone. Kaya, Karn, and Teferi throw their arms over Koth as tears take over. Next to them, Chandra shakes Nissa. Maybe it was too much to hope for. You could spend every waking moment laboring to further a cause and never see it come to fruition. Wanting something so badly it threatens to break you doesn't mean you're entitled to it. And yet sometimes, the tension on Chandra's face melted to pure happiness as Nissa embraced her. The 2 share a kiss. This is what they all fought for, what Melira died for, why Karn gave up Venzer's spark, why Teferi spent hundreds of years trying to restore his home. This was life. And that's going to do it for today's video, guys, and while I normally like to do a breakdown of the story, it won't be as in-depth as I'd like it to be because a lot of my thoughts will be going into another video, March of the Machine's Eulogy, in which I like to look at a story arc objectively, find its consequences, and examine other important aspects. Regardless, it looks like the major points of the March of the Machine finale is that, yes, we have discovered a cure for Phyrexia. While Melira always stated that she could cure the physical effects of glistening oil, for the completed planeswalkers, there needs to be an extra step, namely fixing their sparks. Similarly to how Venzer once used his spark to clean Karn's heart, the Silver Golem again uses Venzer's spark to scrub clean the sparks of Ajani and Nissa, essentially reversing the effects and bringing them back to life. While I can't say I love this direction, feeling that it had more impact to the story to lose these characters, there were some positives to take away. Nissa and Chandra share an embrace and kiss, meaning that the story for New Phyrexia effectively restored the relationship War of the Spark randomly squashed. And it wasn't like this move was totally without consequence. Karn lost his Planeswalker spark, it's gone, it's exhausted. And Melira had to trade her life for this gift. This means the only known way to cure Phyrexia is double gone. Karn's spark and Melira's life. Meaning until they find a way, which Melira kinda hinted at, they ain't gonna be curing anyone else. The other big takeaway is the locking of Phyrexia away and the breaking of their invasions across the multiverse. The way it's described makes some sense. The oil cannot respond to commands coming from the soul of New Phyrexia because the planet itself technically doesn't exist in reality. And it was suggested that Elish Norn had taken command from Phyrexia itself, so with her dead, it also is impossible. Without command, the hive mind cannot function. Now we have all these completed agents and war machines laying inert across the plains, which I hope will probably be showing up on cards for years to come. It'll be a nice little callback to this huge event. It's like Dominaria post the first invasion, but for everywhere. Now, I'll be doing a much longer, much more in-depth breakdown of the entire March of the Machine story, plus my speculations on the future in another video. So make sure you become a subscriber and tick that notification bell so you don't miss it. But for now, that's going to close the curtain on March of the Machine. I really appreciate all of your support during this story. You guys have been insane watching my content, and I love you for it. Now, I need to take a small break. Working my job, being a new parent, and banging out these videos has been rewarding, but also very exhausting. As always, I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the Marching Machine saga, please consider supporting the channel by leaving a like, becoming a subscriber or member, dropping a super thanks, and sharing it with friends. It all goes a long way in helping us build this community. And until next time, guys, see ya!